Thank you very much, Amy. And thank you very much, Kemp Toastmasters, members, and guests. When people think of Florida, they always think of the southern part of Florida, Miami, Florida. They think of South Beach. They never think of North Florida. It never comes to mind. It's never on people's mind. The purpose of this speech is to give people an interest in what Jacksonville has to offer, which I think is a very dynamic city and a city I've grown to love and a city I'm going to be moving to again in a couple of weeks. The saying is, you got to know about where you're going, and it's always good to look into the history of the place you were going. Jacksonville initially Jacksonville in the late 18th century was known as Cowdford, which was settled by British colonists. Its major development occurred in the late 19th century when it became a winter vacation destination for tourists from the North and the Midwest. So I am going to go through the different parts of the history of Jacksonville. Ancient history, archaeological evidence indicates 6,000 years of human habitation in the area. Pottery has been found dating the 2500 BC, nearly the oldest in the United States and second to artifacts of the Savannah River area. In the 16th century, the beginning of the historical period, the area was inhabited by the Mocama, a coastal subgroup of the Timucua indigenous Native Americans. At that time of contact with Europeans, most Mocama villages in present were part of the powerful chiefdom known as Satuera, which is in Fort George Island near the St. Johns River. In 1513, Spanish explorers settled Jacksonville, and there were missionaries. And also in 1562, a French naval officer, Jean Ribault, and 150 settlers arrived seeking land for a safe haven for the French Huguenots, Protestants suffering religious persecution in France. Ribault explored the mouth of the St. Johns River, moving north and establishing the colony of Charlesford, of now what is Parris Island, South Carolina. Ribault returned to France, but the French wars of religion had broken out during his absence. His return to Florida was delayed as a result of without leadership approaches. The colonists abandoned Charles Fort, and Ribault's former lieutenant, Rene de la Dare, launched a new expedition to found a colony in the St. Johns River. In 1564, the settlers established Fort Caroline on top of St. John's Bluff. They faced the Tacoma Indian tribe and lived upriver. As a result, they faced famine and 3 mutinies, and Ribault finally reached the Fort Relief expedition in the summer and assumed command of the settlement. In the meantime, the Spanish admiral Pedro had established a colony of St. Augustine, which is 35 miles to the south. Excellent area to go to. So the Spanish wound up taking over Fort Caroline during this time and taking control over Jacksonville during that time. Also, during the time when Spain took over, the British, there was a settlement of British settlement of Americans of English descent and Scotch-Irish descent that were moving into the Florida backwoods and they were coming from Georgia and South Carolina.
Pros.
Spanish authorities could not. In 1414, the War of 1812, the British, the U.S. Navy assisted American settlers in Florida in the Patriot War, a convert attempt to seize control of Florida from the Spanish. There. Then also there was the outbreak of the Civil War during Jacksonville. Jacksonville was a key supply point for hogs and cattle leaving Florida and aiding the Confederate cause. But most of the U.S. Navy blockaded Jacksonville during this time. And there was also the Confederate Army Battle of Olustee, which was big during that time. After the war, it was a winter resort area for reconstruction. near St. It became popular winter resorts for the rich and famous of the Gilded Age. Visitors arrived by steamboat, by railway, and wintered dozens of hotels and boarding houses. In 1888, subtropical exposition was held in Jacksonville and attended by the president Grover Cleveland. That was his winter escape going to the White House. It wasn't maybe not as nice as Mar-a-Lago, but I think it could be better. The next is yellow fever epidemic took place in 1886 and 1888. Nearly 10% of the more than 4,000 victims died, including the city's mayor during that time. In 1901, there was a great fire in downtown Jacksonville that was the largest urban fire in the southern eastern United States. It started with hot ash from a shanty house's chimney, landed on dry moss at Cleveland's fiber factory. At 12:30, most of the Cleveland workers at lunch. By the time they returned, the entire city was engulfed in flames. The fire destroyed the business district and rendered 10,000 residents homeless in the course of 8 hours. Florida Governor William S. Jennings declared a state of martial law during this time. Jacksonville was also big with the motion picture industry during this time. It was based in Fort Lee during that time, and they had a movie where Oliver Babe Hardy, a comedian actor, became his motion picture in Jacksonville. He starred over 36 short films and returned to Jacksonville. And Jacksonville's known as the gateway to Florida when going in. One of the big things about Jacksonville is it's right entering Florida. You're near Florida. You enter what you're looking for, maybe the promised land. And then last, in my big experience, is Jacksonville, the U.S. Navy. They developed the Naval Air Station October 15th, 1940, where they had the Blue Angels, and it was involved during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Also, one of the biggest ships was the aircraft carrier, the USS John F. Kennedy, otherwise known as the Big John, which the ship had about nearly 1,000 people on the ship. So those were one of the biggest things that came to Jacksonville. But it has a very vibrant downtown now. Many businesses, CSX, Modus, are involved in Jacksonville. So I urge you to take a visit to Jacksonville. You'll be surprised with all the excitement they have. Thank you.